How out of touch could Obama administration be that they put on a spectacle of a vacation like that at a time when people can't pay their mortgages, when a time when people are losing their jobs, when a time that unemployment keeps going up? They're out of touch. They are the royalty, the elite, just like the stars in Hollywood. It's show business for ugly people in Washington. It's star power. They have no idea how the average person lives or feels because of the way they're treated.
The U.S. Treasury is so pathetic that they are now even accepting online donations just to try to pay down the debt.
The U.S. has no way of paying back its $13.4 trillion national debt and $81 trillion in total obligations, yet there is still no widespread outrage in this country about deficit spending. Politicians continue to promise more giveaways and lower taxes, and Americans fall for it because they are unaware of the hyperinflation that awaits. Americans continuously get brainwashed by the mainstream media to elect both Democrats and neocon Republicans who do nothing other than rapidly increase the size of government.
When I was a kid, growing up during the Cold War, I used to hear about the communists in power, the party. Yeah. The party's still in power. But instead of having one name, communist, they have two names, Republican, Democrat. It's one party. Party members, party heads, party whips. The party. They're having a party and you're paying for it.
Right now, there are candidates debating about the Constitution of this country. In fact, some of these candidates are holding up the Constitution and saying how they're going to restore it. Yet the next sentence out of their mouth is how they're going to reform an entitlement program, or how they're going to take money from a group of people to offer a tax deduction to another group of people. Redistribution of wealth is not in the Constitution, and neither is a democracy. The Founding Fathers set up a republic so that we did not have mob rule, so that we could not vote each other gifts, because they knew that if you continue to re-elect politicians that promised you more of other people's money, we would eventually destroy this nation.
In order for Obama to reach his goal of lowering the U.S. budget deficit down to $752 billion in 2015, the White House is projecting an average GDP growth rate of 5.58% over the next 5 years. In the second quarter of 2010, U.S. GDP grew by only 1.6%. To get this dismal 1.6% growth rate, the U.S. government had to spend $3.7 trillion on bailouts, stimulus bills, the buying of mortgage-backed securities, and other commitments. The U.S. government bought GDP growth in 2009 by implementing its destructive cash for clunkers and home buyer tax rebate programs.
Recently in Los Angeles, California, my friend had their car stolen. It was a 1994 Camry. And we were wondering, why would anybody want to steal this old vehicle? You know what the cops told him? That because of the cash for clunkers program, because of this supposedly government stimulus plan that was supposed to help our economy, thefts are up for older cars because the thieves need the parts. Parts are in huge demand for older vehicles because the government literally destroyed a working asset and sent it off to China.
The U.S. is so desperate to generate revenue now that they are taking advantage of America's concerns about inflation by selling forever stamps. Stamp prices have increased by 475% over the past 40 years. The U.S. Postal Service claims that if you go to the post office and purchase a forever stamp today, you will be able to use it to mail a first-class letter at any time in the future. NIA considers forever stamps to be a scam. The government is spending the funds they generate from the sale of forever stamps and won't have the resources to meet these obligations in the future. NIA is confident that the U.S. government will soon propose more stimulus spending while the Federal Reserve unleashes additional quantitative easing. Before long, the government will go bust and will either default on its Social Security obligations or print the money to pay them, creating hyperinflation. Most likely, the government will choose the hyperinflation route, and American Social Security checks won't be worth enough to pay for the gas needed to drive to the bank to cash them. Their only value will be as toilet paper. Only then will there be a real revolution where Americans march to Washington to remove those who have destroyed our nation, just like they did in Bell, California, after it was too late. Americans today are too busy waiting 12 hours in line across countless city blocks to be the first to purchase the new iPhone 4. The $700 they spend for a defective device that will break within a year could instead be used to buy 39 ounces of silver. 39 ounces of silver will be enough to feed a family of 4 for 6 months during hyperinflation. Those with iPhones will likely recycle them for the trace amounts of precious metals inside, which will be enough to buy food for only 1 week.
I mean, can you imagine, hundreds of people waiting in line around just to get the new iPhone when,
I think that that's the life that those people want to continue to live, and will live that life till the last minute because they're afraid of change, and they're afraid of this other life that, in my opinion, could be much better. Get rid of all the material items, get rid of all of these stores, go out and produce your own food and grow your own garden and have your own livestock. You don't have to have, a giant piece of property to do that, but they're afraid, and by the time they wake up, I think it'll be too late. That's my opinion.
A year ago, most mainstream economists were predicting that we would see a U-shaped economic recovery by now.
You think this is going to be like a U-shaped recovery?
A U-shaped recovery, a U-shaped kind of recovery.
A triple U-shaped recovery.
NIA said a year ago that the economic recovery was phony and prices were rising only due to inflation. There clearly was no U-shaped recovery, and today most mainstream economists have changed their tune and are calling for a double-dip recession. The truth is, the recession never ended. Wall Street benefited from the Federal Reserve's 0% interest rates, which allowed them to recklessly speculate risk-free and pay out record bonuses. Meanwhile, the rest of America has been suffering more than ever and will soon feel the consequences of the Wall Street bailouts through massive price inflation. Tensions are rapidly escalating across the country between the poor who are suffering the most from inflation and the wealthy who have benefited from it.
Get that camera away from me. Hey, this is a public place.
Welcome to Venice Beach, California, where tensions are rising.
Come on back. Now you're going straight in.
Between homeowners and the motor homeless.
It's a great place. Venice is great.
Who take over entire streets, living out of campers, vans, buses, trucks, and RVs.
They're not going to be able to shut down this place because it's the ocean.
As you can see, Venice has become an urban RV park.
Along with it, noise, drugs, alcohol, prostitution, and human waste on the curb and in residents' yards.
So they take up very, very dear parking. They leave a lot of trash. Occasionally they use people's front yards as toilets.
If there's such a big problem, get a porta potty and put it in your backyard. Someplace for somebody to take it down. All right, you can afford, if you can pay $1,200 a month for rent, you can afford a porta potty.
The same people who told us that there wasn't going to be a recession, they're now telling us that the recession ended back in June of 2009. Yet tell that to the people who are on the unemployment line. Food stamps are up, foreclosures are up. Just in September of 2010, here we're supposed to be through the worst of it. And we had the most foreclosures on record in the history of the United States. Over 100,000 foreclosures just in September. Long-term unemployment continues to stay at record highs. Yet they're telling us the recession's over.
In every single one of our documentaries, we've urged Americans to get out of the US dollar and invest into gold and silver. Our first documentary was Hyperinflation Nation, which we released in June of 2009, and since then, gold has risen by 48% and silver by 74%. The longer Americans wait to get out of the US dollar and into precious metals, the more their purchasing power they're going to lose. It's that simple. The only thing that the Federal Reserve can do to stop gold and silver from rising and restore confidence in the dollar is to raise interest rates from their current level of 0% to a level that is higher than real price inflation.
There are educated people, even college professors right now, teaching our kids that America is a free market economy. Yet when Ben Bernanke speaks, or even the very thought of the anticipation of him speaking, It moves prices all across the country, all across the world. That is not a free market, and that is definitely not capitalism. According to the government, price inflation is 1.5% year to year. Yet Ben Bernanke, his target rate is at least 2%, and he's going to do this through quantitative easing. But if you look at the way the government calculates inflation, calculates price inflation, it's fatally flawed. The National Inflation Association believes price inflation is at least 5%. Now, what do you think is going to happen when Ben Bernanke does meet his target rate of 2%? Do you think that 5% might jump up to a real inflation rate of 10%, possibly even spiraling out of control? Because remember, the world reserve currency is the US dollar. And because of this status, there's over $10 trillion held by foreigners. If this money comes back to America, it will come back to bite us in the worst possible way. We could see an epidemic of hyperinflation here in the United States of America.
It will be impossible for Ben Bernanke to ever raise interest rates higher than the real rate of price inflation because of the size and scope of our national debt. Our national debt is now 15 times larger than it was when Paul Volcker prevented hyperinflation in 1980 by raising interest rates to 20%. Our GDP has only grown 1.5 times larger since then. If Bernanke were to raise interest rates in any substantial way, Americans' mortgage payments would double and our budget deficit would explode by trillions of dollars per year. I believe that Ben Bernanke is under pressure by the President and Congress to keep interest rates at artificially low levels until the dollar is basically worthless. Americans living in a fiat world got insane. Today, gold and gold mining shares account for only less than 1% of the total world financial assets. From 1921 to 1981, gold and gold mining shares accounted for more than 25% of world financial assets. Even if all of the world's non-gold assets were to decline by 2/3, gold would still need to go to $10,000 per ounce for this figure to get back to 25%. It is absolutely shocking to me that the mainstream media is proclaiming that there is a gold bubble, when in fact in 2010, Americans have only bought $2.7 billion worth of gold, and guess how much worth of bonds? $155 billion worth of bonds. That's 57 times more bonds than gold. Now you tell me, are we in a gold bubble? It's absolutely shocking to me how clueless investment advisors are today in the US. I mean, can you believe that they're telling Americans, take 25% of your savings and put it into US Treasuries or bonds, and take the other 25% of your savings and keep it in US dollar cash. I mean, 50% of your savings and you're putting it into dollar-denominated assets that are basically worthless pieces of paper. Now, what drives me nuts is the fact that not only are these investment advisors telling you to put 50% of your savings into dollar-denominated assets that are basically worthless in my opinion, but you're lucky if they tell you to put 5% at most into gold, the most real and stable asset that the world has ever seen. I mean, Americans are being brainwashed right now as if gold is the risky and speculative investment, when in fact it's the dollar. I mean, the only reason why gold is volatile right now is because it's priced in unstable dollars.
Many have said what the Founding Fathers faced was impossible, and what we face is impossible. But now is the time, and you are the person. Join us at inflation.us for insightful reporting, for alternative investments to protect your family from the consequences of reckless and out-of-control government. We are the people. We have the power. We are the resistance.